Can't get enough of Team Pete? Well, you've come to the right place, as each week I interview supporters of Pete Buttigieg, former candidate for President of the United States and current Secretary of Transportation. Hear their personal stories about why they became part of Team Pete and how they started a movement. Join us as we talk Pete, politics, and anything in between. Hi everyone, my name is Kim Ang and I am the host of this podcast, Talking with Team Pete. And today my special guest is George Biaggi. Hi George.
Hey Kim Ang, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, thank you so much for joining me today. I've been told by several people that I have to talk to George. Got to talk to George, so I'm glad that I get to talk to George today.
Gosh, I hope I don't disappoint.
Yeah, so now the bar is set very high.
The pressure's on here. So.
Indeed.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just dive right in. And can you tell us a little bit about yourself? I understand you're from San Diego, and
I am.
You mentioned yesterday that you kind of got started in politics when you were a kid. So.
Very
how was that?
Yes. So I live here in San Diego. I've been in San Diego for 33 years, but I grew up at the South Jersey Shore in a shore town called Ventnor, New Jersey. If you ever play Monopoly, those are the streets of Ventnor and Atlantic City and Margate. So that's where I grew up, and that's kind of where I cut my teeth working on campaigns. Even at a really early age, my mom was involved in local politics. She started out working in the local elections in Ventnor and working for the group to change the city government. And so even at the age of 7 and 8, I got to campaign handing out door hangers to get people to vote. And back then, I don't recall that we had a list like they do nowadays that targets, individual high propensity voters. You literally put a door hanger on every door in the town. So as a 7 and 8 year old, there were a group of us that were kids of the people that were either involved in the campaign or running. We got to, do like our entire neighborhood and going door to door to door. And so I got the bug kind of early to work on campaigns, and I had worked on some in my teens, working for the New Jersey governor's races. And then when I moved to California, I luckily worked my way into campaigning for and ultimately being staff members for elected officials. The first big race I got involved in San Diego was for Christine Kehoe, and she was the first openly LGBTQ community member elected to the San Diego City Council, the first one ever elected in San Diego County history. So I got to be on her staff, and then we both, on that same staff, is a woman that many Californians now know as the Senate President Pro Tem, Toni Atkins. I worked with her and then for her as her communications director. And then she went on, that was when she was on the city council. And then she went on to become Speaker of the California Assembly and now Senate President Pro Tem. So that was an amazing experience for me to work for somebody who was so grounded in democratic politics. She grew up in Appalachia. She's she's sort of the real deal. It was easy to campaign for her. And it's so funny that ultimately I got to work, volunteer for the Pete campaign. Again, a candidate so easy to campaign for because you believe in them so deeply and you trust that they're going to kind of always do the right thing. So I always say when you're able to work on a campaign for a candidate or a cause that you really believe in, you can be unstoppable. Because when you talk person to person with voters and you really believe in it, right. That comes through. That authenticity, that commitment, and that passion translates to people that you're talking to. So, of course, it really helped with Pete, because here we are at a national level working for this amazing candidate who's an easy sell. And even if the people didn't know who he is, we would always tell them, go on YouTube, Google his name, and just watch some of his town halls or his speeches, and you'll be convinced. And, we knew that with certainty. Because for many of us, that's how we got our start, which was somebody telling us about this guy. Someone said to me, hey, are you supporting Pete Buttigieg? And at the time, I'd never heard of him. It was early on in 2019, and I think as a Californian and an openly gay person who had taken advantage of gay marriage, I was a big Kamala Harris supporter. She had been so supportive of the LGBT community during the gay marriage issue. and she was our senator, and I really liked her. So I figured, oh, I hear she's running for president. I'll probably support her. And I had given her some money. But then somebody said, you need to key into this guy because he's pretty special. And so I went on like everybody did, and either I went online or I found one of his speeches, and then we watched his town hall for him. And I was hooked. I was like, oh, wow, this is somebody who I really can get behind. And so, for many of us, the rest is history. Once we got introduced to him, we decided we were going to do whatever we could during that presidential campaign to make sure as many people as possible heard about him, knew about him, and then ultimately, like us, loved him as much as we do. And, I can say it's been a successful run, I think, for a lot of us, because we're still campaigning for Pete, even though he's not running. Right. Even when we meet people still, I tell them, oh, yeah, I worked on the Pete Buttigieg campaign. And then I'll ask them, what do you think of him? And, and if they don't know him, I'm like, you need to get to know him because he's going to be president someday. And so then they're intrigued. But often people are like, yeah, I love him. He's a great guy. He's so well-spoken. He's one of the only candidates that I actually listen to or pay attention to. So it's kind of great to be a part of that family, the Pete family, because we knew him back when, right? We can say we knew him before everybody else knew him, and that's kind of been the experience with San Diego for Pete. We, after Pete sort of had his exploratory committee and then he announced he was running, there was a group here that it was started by Andy McNew. She had a Pete group online, San Diego for Pete. And there were, not a lot of people at the time, but if you wanted to meet other Pete folks, that was the way to do it. So, those of us that had shown up for the announcement when Pete announced that he was running, we had a house party at a friend of mine, Roman, his house out in La Mesa. And we had about 30 people there. I think Andy actually showed up at that, and that's where I got to meet her. And at that meeting, we all said, hey, if you want to keep doing this, sign up for San Diego for Pete. So a bunch of us did. And then we had our first meeting, and out of that came the sort of steering committee of the 8 or 9 of us that would become sort of the core of the family that would be together for the next 3 or 4 months. And many of us are all still best friends now. But at the early going, we decided, let's see where we can go with this. And we decided we needed to do something very visible. And the first big event coming up was San Diego Pride. And it's huge. San Diego Pride is massive. The parade gets about 250,000 people, maybe 125 to 150,000 people the whole weekend. About 250,000 people either go to the festival or take advantage of the parade. So we decided let's figure out how we can get a Pete group in the parade. So it was like $1,000, and we're like, oh crap, we don't have $1,000. So we raised a lot of money, and we raised enough money to kind of get into the parade. But then we thought we don't have any money left over for swag, stuff to hand out. So we reached out to the campaign daringly and asked them to underwrite us for the parade. And they did. And so then the money that we raised, we could only raise up to $1,000 because we didn't want to become a PAC. We didn't want to have to register federally and stuff like that. So we capped it at like $999. And then from that point, we did this thing called in-kind donations. People would ask us, can we donate? We're like, what you can do is you can go buy buttons. You can go buy shirts. You can go buy the banners. And so we had people buy all of those things. But it all started with the Pride event. And we were lucky enough to get the Pride flag. There was a banner, a Pete banner in the Pride colors in 2020. And it had was making its way around the country. And so it would get mailed to us in this huge tube. And it was a massive banner. And then we all signed the back of it. And then at the end of the parade, we sent it off to the next place that was having a Pride celebration. So it was pretty awesome.
Nice.
I don't know where that banner is now. Hopefully it's with the Pete Museum in South Bend. But it was a really great kickoff. We had probably 100 people marching with us in the parade. And we were the only presidential candidate with something going on in the parade. And it was a big boom. I mean, and from that point forward, we just started to grow in numbers to the point of where we decided to really make a go of this and campaign full time. And we broke into geographic groups in these things called Pete Pods. I'd come up with this idea that we should break the county into 5 or 6 geographic areas and then have somebody on the steering committee, one or two people, go to each of those geographic areas and be responsible for them. So they were like mini campaigns inside this one bigger campaign. And then at that time, the campaign told us that they wouldn't be able to send us any staff members. You know, all of their time and energy was in Iowa, Nevada, South Carolina, and New Hampshire. Understandably, those are the first 4 states. So they essentially were like, y'all are on your own, and we wish you well. And they would send us, you know, sometimes they would send us some brochures and stuff. But we essentially ran a Pete campaign in San Diego through all volunteers. And I mean hours and hours and hours of volunteer folks coming in. So that was sort of the genesis of how, you know, getting involved in a campaign, and then it kind of grew into that. But you know, but we all have our Pete story, right? What we saw in him that got us really intrigued. And like so many of us, we hearken back to the rules of the road, right? For those that may be new to Pete, when you joined the campaign as a volunteer or as a staff member, you were told that there were these 10 rules of the road that you needed to follow to really effectively be a part of this campaign. And for me, the most important ones were the first one, which was respect, and the last one, which was joy. And I'll explain to you why. So the respect part still resonates with me in every campaign that I've since worked on or that I've interacted with, because Pete and the Pete campaign were very, very adamant about always putting your best face forward when you're representing the campaign. And it is such a glorious rule, because, you know, so much of what we see on TV and out on the streets is so negative. For me, it was so wonderful to be a part of a campaign valued respect amongst ourselves, but amongst the other campaigns as well. And that was vital. If you remember early on, Kim Ann, there were 22 Democratic candidates, I think, maybe, or were there 15? I don't know. There were a lot, right? So when you would go to major events, whether it was the California, I was a delegate to the California convention. And so when you'd go, all the other campaigns were there, right? And they, you know, when you wore your Pete garb, I felt like I was a representative of the campaign, and I needed to not let them down. So when I interacted with anybody from another campaign, I was polite, I was respectful, and we always went the extra step to thank them for getting involved. Which is, hey, look, you may not support Pete. I hope that you'll give him a look, but I think it's great that you're campaigning. It was such a beautiful, holistic way to look at campaigning, which is we're all trying to do the same thing, elect the best candidate. Let's be on our best behavior, and let's treat everybody with respect. And you know, online, that's sometimes not easy to do. Twitter can be very toxic, but I will say the Pete campaign and the Pete people online are really, really quite good at not falling down that rabbit hole. They will not take the bait. You know, they'll state the position. They'll maybe call somebody out and say, you know, that's not really the nicest way to respond to somebody else from another campaign. And, you know, there were certain campaigns that were absolutely unmerciful toward Pete, really nasty. You know, and it was hurtful. It was hurtful because we're like, we don't do that to them and their candidate. You know, it's like, why can't you just talk? Why can't you tell me why you think your candidate is better rather than why you think my candidate doesn't meet your expectations, or why you, or they make up stories and they spread lies. And it's like, you know, social media can be really a dangerous place. But by and large, Pete folks always, and even if somebody steps out of line, other Pete people will tell them, hey, rules of the road, and they'll write back, right, I'm sorry, I got out of line, you know. And then the other part was joy. The other rule of the road that I liked was joy, was bringing joy to a campaign. I find presidential campaigns to be my most passionate. I am more passionate about who is the president. And for a lot of people, it's not that way. Some people are way more into local elections. And I get it. You know, where the rubber meets the road sometimes. I worked for city council members. You can effectuate immediate change in somebody's life when you're a local politician or a local candidate. I get it. But there's something about trying to shape the future of the nation through an individual that can effectuate positive change that really gets my political blood, you know, going and gets my energy going. And there was just something about not just Pete, but the people he attracted to his campaign that continue to bring me joy. You know, it was, you know, I think you and I talked a little bit about yesterday about the type of people that were attracted to the campaign, and they had done sort of
the personality test.
They had done the personality test with a large group of volunteers that were contained at some weekend conference, and 80 to 90% of them were introverts. Now, me, I'm not an introvert. I'm an ENFJ, which is like coach, cheerleader, captain. That's totally me. But 80 to 90% of the people that came to the Pete campaign were introverted. And in our own San Diego campaign, we had people in our own team, San Diego, who were like, this is so not me. I'm an introvert.
Yeah.
The things that you all have me doing are out of my comfort zone, but I love it, right?
Right.
You know,
right.
And I thought that was really wonderful that introverts, you know, Pete was encouraging introverts to do something in a very extroverted manner, which was stand on a street corner, waving banners and flags at somebody, or canvassing. I can't think of anything more anathema to an introvert than knocking on a stranger's door and saying, "Hi,
exactly.
Look, guess who I support?" But they were doing it. You know, and I that's what I loved about the campaign. It brought out just the nicest people that you wanted to be friends with and wanted to stay friends with. You know, so early on, we had this group of the steering committee members. We all really got along, and then came this call for barnstormers, and we're like, okay, what is this? And somebody said to me, they want us to go to Des Moines. I'm like, really? I said, I've never been to Iowa, so let's look into this. And four of us, Andy, myself, Kate, and Marilyn, we decided we were going to go to Des Moines and be a barnstormer. So we flew out together. We met other barnstormers in airports around the country. People were posting photos. It's like, it's on. This is going to be amazing, right? And for those that may not be aware of what the barnstormers were and still are, these are people who self-funded themselves to travel around the country to campaign for Pete in predetermined locations, whether it was Iowa, Nevada. I think that's where you and I met. You and I met in Nevada during that weekend. And so it was a way you could really contribute in your person by showing up in these other states and showing that Pete had support from all over the country. And the deal was we wanted to have people from all 50 states. And we got it. People from all 50 states descended on Des Moines for the Liberty and Justice Dinner, which is this big dinner they have in the Wells Fargo Center. It's like 14,000 seats. It's like a regular, like the sports arena here in San Diego. And it's a big dinner, and the diners are all on the floor of the arena. And then the supporters of the campaigns ring the arena in all the seats. We wanted, as a Pete group, to make an impression by getting as many tickets as we could and getting as many people there. And we did. We got a ton of people there, right? It was over, I think there were 1,200 barnstormers from 49 states and another 1,000 Pete supporters who were sort of honorary barnstormers because they were in Iowa. We had like 2,200 people, specifically from the Barnstormer movement or Iowa, that were there to support Pete. And then other people that came as well who weren't necessarily barnstormers. And by the time that event kicked off, and you may have seen videos of it, we had these wristbands that they gave us when we came in. And as soon as Pete was announced, he was first to go out of 14 speakers. The music, Panic at the Disco was his walk-on theme. That starts playing. They're like, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mayor Pete Buttigieg. And he comes out on this long runway. I get goosebumps thinking about it. As the music starts, our wristbands were illuminated, and they start blinking in time with the music. And the entire section of the arena that we had taken up is illuminated. You could hear almost an audible gasp from the rest of the crowd. Because they're like, oh my, we were like a quarter of the arena, which is just amazing considering there were 14 candidates there. And it was just incredible, and like I say, that was the culmination of a day that for many of the barnstormers, we've been known to say to each other, that was one of the greatest days of my life. And I've had many really great days in my life. That's easily top 3, if not the most exciting day and most incredible, memorable day of my life. And for all of us that had come there were many things to do on that very long Friday that we'll remember forever. It started out in the morning. There were these Pete-ups for all the states, had a breakfast Pete-up that you did either at a coffee shop or a hotel. You had a location that you were sent to go to. And I remember the California one, we had probably, I think, 125 to 150 barnstormers from California. And that morning we had over 100 at this coffee shop. And Dan Merica from CNN actually sent out a tweet that morning. There, look at these. I'm at a coffee shop, and there are 100 Pete Buttigieg supporters from California here. You know, essentially, this is going to be a big weekend. And that was great for us. We're sitting there, and people were showing it. Hey, we've already made CNN. And this was going on all over Des Moines. You know, there were smaller states that had fewer people. They were grouped together. And so what you did was you sat there and you talked about, so what are we going to do this weekend to make sure that we make the most of our time here? Well, are we going to canvass? We're going to do visibility. And so for many of us, we left the Pete up at the coffee shop and walked over outside the LJ and joined all of the Pete volunteers and Des Moines campaign workers who were doing visibility. They had these huge Pete signs. And then there were these college-age kids in these black and gold, and you'll see these overalls. Now, these are blue and gold because those are the Pete campaign colors, but they were in black and gold because those are the Iowa colors, the University of Iowa. And they were doing all these cheers and they did the High Hopes dance. And I remember Kate and we were hanging out together, and we said to each other, we are so getting those overalls. I said, we're getting those, and we're going to make the steering committee members get them, and we're going to wear those at every event we go to in San Diego. And so we were all into it. We convinced three of the other 7 to get the overalls. Some of them were like, there's no way in hell I'm ever wearing overalls like that in public. We're like, okay, we get it. But so what we did was we got these overalls, and we ultimately wore them. Well, I'll tell you about that in a second, but because I can talk forever about visibility. But that day in the LJ, so then we did visibility, and it started raining. And we stayed out there for like 3.5 hours. It was cold, it was wet, but it was so much fun. And like we took over a large portion of the roadway. Across from us were some Beto people, and then down the road were some Liz Warren folks. So you can imagine, as people from Des Moines are driving through the city, all they're seeing are all of these signs, all these candidates. Something which they're used to, because, you know, I will say this about people from Iowa: they're the friendliest, most engaged political people I've ever met in my life. They're welcoming. They want you to tell them why you support a candidate. Do you know how gratifying that is for somebody who's canvassed in many other states, where you know you've got about 20 seconds to get their attention before they slowly close the door in your face? In Iowa, they're like, "Come on in. Let me make you some coffee. Tell me why Pete." I'm like, wait a minute, is this some strange universe where people really care about who I like for president? It was really wonderful. Yeah. They're just the nicest people in Iowa. I had the greatest time there the 2 times that I got to go there for Pete. You know, so then we finished at the visibility, and we all went down to this rally. So we're at this public park, and out comes Pete. There's like 3,000 people jammed at this public park. And I remember, as barnstormers, we will remember this forever. He goes, "Thank you, Iowa." And everybody applauds. "Thank you, barnstormers." And we're like, oh my God, he knows we're here. It was so validating. We were like, you know, and I think that resonated with my good friend Jacob King in Tennessee. He is one of the 5 or 6 barnstormers that has written a book. And the name of his book is "Thank You, Barnstormers." And oh my God, I just, when I see that that's the title of it, I'm like, yeah, Jacob, I get it. That was quite a moment, right? Like, he's looking at us like, I see you, and I thank you for coming from all over the country to be here for me. It was really nice to have a candidate kind of validate what you're doing. You know, it was really, really sweet. So then we did this rally. Then we followed, at the rally, he marched up the street to the Wells Fargo Center, and we followed him. You know, and we were like 8 blocks long. It was unbelievable. And there was a marching band. He was there with Chasten. They were holding hands, which was very validating for an openly gay, you know, candidate to do that with his husband. And the funny thing was, you notice, so as you get closer to the Wells Fargo Center, we're passing the other campaigns that had their buses or their kind of meeting areas. And they were so much smaller than us. And you could see they were looking at us like, what the heck? Because we all had signs, whistles, cowbells, you know, all this gold and blue following Pete for like 8 blocks. It was incredible. So you could just tell something special was happening, right? And then, of course, I tell you, we get to the LJ, and this moment happens where we're all there. We've got these thunder sticks and we've got these, these wristbands. And then Pete gives this amazing speech, which was just beautiful, And, and I'll tell you, the best part of all that activity that day came the next day when Pete and some folks from his campaign tweeted that, hey, Barnstormers, you did this. And meaning they showed a photo of him surrounded by press. They said they were going out into Iowa to campaign, and the Barnstormers had created such a movement in the media. Like we got their attention that they followed him. And of course, most of it was him. He gave this amazing speech, and he was leading in the Iowa polls, I think, at that point, or very close to it. But I think we helped create this energy, which was the exact reason why we were there. I mean, it literally, it went according to plan, which was, we're coming, we want to be noticed, we want other people to notice that Pete already has a groundswell of support from around the country, and especially here in Iowa. And that's exactly the message that got out. So much so that from that point forward, Pete always had this cabal of reporters on his bus in cars and stuff following him to each of his events. And you can track it both to I think the steak fry and the LJ were those two big events that the volunteers in Iowa and the Barnstormers really worked hard at getting people at. And it was, so talk about introducing people to a grassroots campaign that gets this amazing shot in the arm, right? Gets this attention. And then for the next 3 months leading up to Iowa, we all go back to our home states and try to replicate that energy, right? Take that joy and that sense of belonging, which is another one of those favorite rules of the road, right? And we try to replicate it in our hometowns. And we took that very seriously. I mean, I think it helped that 4 of the 9 members of our steering committee were Barnstormers and had been in Iowa. So we could come back and share all this information. It got everybody really enthused about the campaign, right? So then we decided, okay, we needed to pick some events in November and December to share the message about Pete. But then we wanted to have in early January our first rollout of San Diego for Pete to all these people who had said that they wanted to volunteer. And we did a volunteer kickoff in early January. And about 150 people showed up. We were overwhelmed. We had gotten a library room, in Mira Mesa. It housed about 150, and we packed the room. And while we were there, we decided that we were going to do this Pete Pod system and get the people in the room to go to the tables in the geographic area where they lived. And so what we did was we essentially created 5 or 6 different mini campaigns within San Diego County. And that was our launching pad. And Kate and I decided that we wanted to do visibility. So we already had our bibs, and we had a bunch of people that decided that they would join us every morning in February during the week, Monday to Friday. We did mornings, and then we did rush hour in the afternoon. So 7 to 9 and 4 to 6. And we got out a map, and we got people from around the county to tell us where they thought the best intersections were. And we put them on the calendar. And we invited people to show up. We said, all you need to do is show up. We've got the signs. We went and we had somebody buy massive Pete for President banners that we could put on these PVC poles so that when people were driving by, you could see them on every corner. We had signs. Each of the steering committee members bought a large Pete head, those mega Pete heads, which get a lot of attention. So we had those in every single visibility. And as I was saying to you yesterday, visibility, for a lot of campaigns, they kind of poo-poo visibility. They feel like, oh, no, we really want to have everybody canvassing or making phone calls. Well, we always say that, I always feel like if it's a new candidate that people don't know, visibility is really key. And for Pete, a lot of people didn't know who he was. They were still learning about him. So we decided if we can make a big splash and get people to key into who he is before Super Tuesday, then we've done our part. We were also canvassing. Don't get me wrong. We canvassed on the weekends. We did phone banking and text banking. But Kate and I decided, and then Lily and Espen and Marilyn also helped us with visibility in other parts of the county. We decided that the best thing about visibility is that for people that are new to campaigning, it's an easy way into a campaign. For many people that have never campaigned before, the thought of knocking on somebody's door is frightening because they feel like, well, I don't know enough about the campaign yet. What if they ask me questions? How am I supposed to answer? And they feel the same about doing phone banking, right? Text banking is a little bit easier, right? You don't have to really make any contact with somebody. But phone banking and canvassing can be a little bit daunting for the new campaign worker. We figured, let's get them into visibility. So when they're out there, especially on the urban street corners, they could then listen to us as we interacted with people that would stop by and talk to us, so they could see how we answered questions. And then, so once they started doing visibility, then some of them would sign up to do the farmers market with us, or they would do some city events where they knew we would be standing and people would be coming to us and talking to us. And we said, look, just come, hold the Pete head, but listen to how we answer questions that people pose to us and how we interact with people, you know? And that included positive people and how we interacted with negative people, right? Because you never want to get into a shouting match or, you know, there's an art to getting rid of somebody who's just trying to take up your time and to be negative. So then what would happen is people would do that. And then before you knew it, they went from visibility to street fairs to phoning to canvassing. And that made me feel so good that they worked their way through and got more comfortable, you know, with what they were doing. And then they became these super volunteers. I mean, I decided I was going to go out and do visibility every day before work. And I would just come to work by 9:30. So I'd go 7 to 9. I told my boss I'll be in at 9:30. And it was totally fine. But for some of these other folks, either they were retired or they didn't work till later in the day. They came to every single visibility every morning. And one woman would bake muffins. Candace baked us fresh muffins every morning. And she would hand them out to us in little bags. This was just, I don't know, this was the most incredible campaign I've ever worked on, man. It was just, I have nothing negative to say about it. Even the last weekend, you know, when we had this massive volunteer turnout, and we did this incredible visibility down in Mission Valley, where we had about 150 people standing on 3 accessible corners, and people in the medians, and we always would keep track of phone honks and thumbs up, and if people were taking videos, and we would quantify at the end of the day which site we would want to go back to based on the amount of response we got. This place was going crazy with honking. We were so energized. You know, it was the Friday before Super Tuesday. And then Saturday, we had a massive canvassing turnout. Tony Atkins had endorsed Pete by then, and she came out and gave a big, rousing sort of get out the troops, get out there and canvass speech. And we were out canvassing Saturday. And then, of course, on Sunday, we're out canvassing, and we got the news that Pete had dropped out. And, of course, we're crushed, especially because the next night, Pete had decided his final public rally before Super Tuesday was going to be in San Ysidro, which is the southernmost community in San Diego at San Ysidro High School. And we were so thrilled and honored that he was coming here right before Super Tuesday. We were going to get 5,000 people into that gymnasium. So we were crushed, you know, but you know, there is a silver lining to for San Diego for Pete, which was 2 weeks later. You may recall, Pete was selected by Jimmy Kimmel to host the Kimmel Show, you know, Tonight Show with Jimmy Kimmel, whatever. But this was literally as COVID was ramping up, but by then they hadn't stopped studio audiences yet, right? So we are driving in a torrential downpour. There were 12 of us from San Diego for Pete, lucky enough to score tickets to I think 175 tickets had been done in a lottery. So there was about 175 people that were going. Some of them from Pete's campaign were flying in from Chicago and Iowa, and 12 from San Diego, and a lot of other folks from around Southern California and even Northern California. So we arrive in Los Angeles about 4 hours early, and it's pouring, right? And we're under this tent outside the theater, and we get text messages. The studio audiences have been canceled. We're so sorry, but they're not allowing studio audiences into tapings. And we're like, you're kidding me, right? So we're standing there, what are we going to do? So I remembered that Andy, the founder of San Diego for Pete, was friends with Liz Smith on Twitter. And they followed each other so they could actually message each other. And we knew that Liz was inside with Pete, literally on the other side of the wall from us. And we're like drowned rats, you know, under this little tent that's literally pouring rain off the side. I said, Andy,
Oh my gosh.
text Liz, and see if Pete or Chasten or both of them can just come out and say hello, and we'll be satisfied. So 3 minutes goes by, boom. God bless Liz Smith for always being on her phone. She texts Andy, stay where you are. We're working on something. Okay. So we're thinking Pete's going to come out. Out comes somebody from the Jimmy Kimmel show, and she says, okay, so here's the deal. You guys are going to get into the taping. We're going to give you wristbands. You got 3 hours. Don't come back for 3 hours. Go have lunch or something. Do not tell anyone that we're doing this, because you're the only people we're doing it for. It's you guys. And there were like 7 or 8 people from Pete's campaign that were there, and a couple other folks, you know, like Liz Smith and Chasten. I think they let 25 or 27 people in total. But they gave us red, orange wristbands. We had 2 people that weren't there yet. They trusted us that they would be there on time, you know, and they wound up there on time, and they got the wristbands. And then they let us come in, and they sat us. They put X's on the backs of the seats, 6 feet apart from each other. So there we are in our yellow San Diego for Pete shirts in the audience. In front of us are Chasten and Liz and some folks from the campaign. And we just couldn't believe it that we got to watch the taping of the show. And a lot of times they actually filmed the audience, so we could see that you could see our yellow shirts on the monitor.
Yeah.
Texting us,
I do remember that.
Tonight.
Yeah.
We saw you tonight. Even Tony Hale, one of the guest stars, was sitting behind one of our members, Paul. He was sitting behind him, so we got in like one of the still shots, you know. But then at the end of the show, God bless Liz Smith. Liz turns around and says, "Would you all like to can we get you in a photo with Pete and Chasten on stage?" And Pete and Chasten were so wonderful and saying, absolutely. So we got to go on. It was Pete and Chasten. And those of us that had already had our pictures with Pete, we sort of moved off to the side because we had 3 or 4 people with us that had never met Pete. So we kind of let them scooch in next to them. Because, you know, once you met them, you know, I always say, get out of the way, let somebody new get in there. Because it's a big moment for them, right? And so we have this great photo on the Kimmel set of us, San Diego for Pete, and a bunch of folks in the campaign, and Pete and Chasten. And that sort of took the sting out of out of the Super Tuesday announcement, which ultimately was the right thing to do. Super smart. Pete is, you know, always the smartest guy in the room, and look at where it got him into a position that he's so good at, so knowledgeable, and look at how many of us are now big on transportation. We never thought we would be. We're like, transportation. We're like transportation wonks now, thanks to Pete. So, and I will say, it didn't stop there. You know, so then many of us went on and worked for the Biden campaign, and we did that. Remember, I don't know if you remember Signs Across America. That was a barnstormer movement, which was, okay, how can we help the campaign since we all can't go to the convention? What can we do as, you know, Pete supporters for Joe? And then we also, of course, roped in a bunch of just regular Joe supporters to do this Signs Across America. And it was 5 different starting points. And there were these routes that ultimately all converged on Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And so, again, there we were going back to our volunteers. Okay, we need you to sign up to do part of the road. And then Kate and I did the longest part. We went from San Diego city limits all the way out just short of Arizona. So we took like a 5.5 hour, and we stopped along the way in the desert, you know, in El Centro. We couldn't get anybody from Arizona to drive out to meet us. So we went about as far as we could. We were like, we need to turn around. It's getting dark and we need to get back. So we probably went about maybe 80 miles short of the Arizona border, maybe 80, 60 miles. And then we turned around. But it was so, and then, you know, people were posting all over the country all of the signs United for Biden all over the country. And many of them were Pete supporters. And you could see in their tags, you know, I'm a Pete Buttigieg supporter who now supports Joe. We're always mindful, whenever we work on a campaign, of letting them know that either we're barnstormers or we're Pete supporters. If you're not a barnstormer, you're just a Pete supporter. We let people know that we're doing this on behalf of sort of the San Diego for Pete or the barnstormers, so that it creates kind of this continued goodwill around Pete and his campaign. Because for us, we're in it for the long haul. So we're playing the long game, which is constantly networking for Pete. So like when I got a group of barnstormers who agreed to do postcards for Tim Alexander. This is a race that I've adopted, NJ2, And you might recall this is where Jeff Van Drew, he used to be a Democrat, and then he, as a traitor, turned ship and went, switched teams and went over to the Republican side. So now he's a Republican in what used to be, he was a Democrat. It was a Democratic, it's a purple district that for a long time had been Republican. He finally turned to Democrat, and then he goes and leaves us. So we're trying to win that seat back. So I asked them in New Jersey, how can I help from California? And they said, phone banking, text banking, and postcards. We have a ton of postcards. And when I was back home in Jersey, I picked up a bunch of postcards and had them send out close to 1,000 postcards to Pete supporters who have been writing postcards for Tim Alexander in New Jersey. Not unusual. Some people are working on campaigns in Wisconsin. Some are working on campaigns in Nevada, in Utah. This is kind of what Pete supporters and what Barnstormers do, which is, okay, what's next? How can we help? Right. Because, if you're really going to effectuate change, it's not just every 4 years. It's during the midterms. It's getting involved in your local elections. But I'm just one of those ones that always make sure I lead with Pete. Because I want to make sure that when the time comes and Pete runs again, they remember that Pete supporters supported their candidates, so they're going to come to help us, or at least pay attention to Pete. It's all just about spreading the joy and the goodwill and the sense of belonging in something that's bigger than ourselves, right? I mean, what's bigger than a presidential campaign? So hopefully that'll pay dividends for us in the long run, because people will have had these positive experiences with members of the Pete campaign and the Pete team. And like I said before, that's one of the reasons why I like this campaign is how we treated other campaigns. I never understood, and I'll use the Bernie campaign, for example, what they got out of being nasty to us. Like when we were at December Nights, we were at the biggest public event in the annual public event in San Diego history. It's, in every year, annually. It's in Balboa Park. It gets about 250,000 people on a Friday and a Saturday. And we were the only campaign there. The nastiest people to us were the Bernie supporters. And I commented afterwards, like, I don't understand the mentality of that. Because they want Bernie to be the nominee. Okay, so if he is the nominee, when he gets to the general election, you're going to need a lot more volunteers. I'll be damned if I'm going to go get involved in a campaign where they treated me like crap. I just don't understand that, right? And it happened with the Warren and the Yang people, too. Those three campaigns, online and in person, were really not nice to us. I don't understand why. It's like, we're being nice to you. If you don't like Pete, you like your candidate, great, go be positive Liz, positive, Andrew, positive Bernie. But why be so nasty toward us? So I would always, when I would meet somebody from the Kamala Harris campaign or the Warren campaign, I would be nice to them. Because if Pete's the nominee, I want to be able to turn to them and say, hey, will you come help us? Just look like what we did for Biden. We all, immediately went from Pete to Joe. How can we help? What can we do to help? Isn't that, as Democrats, isn't that how we win? Isn't that what Republicans do? If anything, they get right in step. For better or worse.
Yes, they do. Right.
Help us, right? But Democrats seem to want to always go at each other. I'm like, once the nominee's chosen, you've got to get in line. Because the option is so bad. It's so horrible. Like, like I'll never understand Jill Stein running or Ralph Nader running. They killed us. They killed us. It's like, so look at what we got. You got somebody who literally hates everything you're for.
Right.
And instead, we're only 70% of the way there, so you want to, destroy us or run as a third party. I just don't get it.
Right.
We got to be smarter.
Right.
We have to be smarter.
Right. Yes. No, you make a really great point, because that's kind of laying the foundation for the future, right? For when Pete runs again. And it's like, well, if you treat people with kindness, they'll treat you with kindness. And I don't understand the negativity of the other campaigns too. And it's like, well, okay, if you think your candidate is so great, then lift them up and don't shove other people down just to lift your guy up.
And I always wondered, do you not read what you've written? Do you not know to the person that's not a political wonk? They read that, they'd be like, what a nasty person. What a petty, nasty person. I just don't think that's, look at where it's gotten us. We're so negative in this country Now we're so divided, people are worried that we may never come out of this, you know?
Yeah.
To think that somebody like Pete, you know, can speak to everybody, right? I mean, we saw it in rural Iowa. I see it from Republican friends of mine that I talk to who don't like Trump and will never vote for Trump, but they really like Pete. They'll be like, oh, Pete is one Democrat that I could easily support. I love to hear that. That's like music to my ears.
Yeah.
And the funny thing is, I mean, Pete is very progressive. You know, if you went down the policy things, they probably wouldn't agree with more than 50% of them. But the way he delivers it, or the way he talks to people, he doesn't talk down to people. You know, he explains things really well, and then he also knows how to eviscerate people that are being negative to him without getting muddy, you know, without getting down in the dirt. He's really quite adept at at handling just about anything that comes his way. We saw that in the debates, right? I mean, we saw how well he handles himself. So I think it doesn't surprise me that we're all still so engaged, because I think it was such a positive experience. We're just biding our time until we get to do it again. Something tells me that Pete may ultimately run for office in Michigan first. That move to Michigan is it's a much more hospitable state for him than Indiana. I could see him potentially, maybe when Gretchen Whitmer is done, maybe he wants to run for governor of Michigan. You know, this is just pure speculation. I have nothing to base it on. You know, people are often saying, well, he hasn't really held high enough elective office. And I hear that. I mean, I get it. Don't necessarily agree with it 100%, because I think being mayor of a medium-sized city gives you a real important set of skills on how to govern.
Right.
But I hear it. I mean, I hear it. And I think Michigan, who knows, and he's young enough, you know, he could serve 8 years as governor and still run for president in his early 50s, you know. So those of us that are older, we just want to make sure we're runs for president again.
Yeah, I don't think we want to wait that long.
No. But, you know, I'm thinking, I don't know, I think maybe 32 or 36. That's what I feel. Because I feel like 24 is going to be Joe. And then clearly, if Kamala is the vice president again, I just get a sense that Pete would step aside and he would not oppose her. I just don't think he would do that. I think that's the kind of person that he is. You know, I think he's you know.
Yeah, he's a team player, so he wouldn't try to go out and run against her if she's gonna put her name in the hat. Yeah.
But I do think that if there were something like a brokered convention, which never happens, but if there were, or if there were an early start, suppose Biden didn't run for some reason, health reasons or something, and then nobody really had a toehold in the early primaries, and the party turned to him. I can imagine him accepting it if they turned to him. I still think we're maybe 4, 8, 6, 10, 14 years away. Well, who knows? We'll see. But,
oh my gosh, George, that sounds so long. So far
I know
away.
It does. And there's a lot of scary people out there that could become president.
Yes. Yeah.
Like, people are like, well, it'll probably be DeSantis anyway instead of Trump. I'm like, I don't know that that's any better. He's actually a little bit smarter than Trump, so that's kind of dangerous. He's equally as nasty, and
equally nasty. Yes.
Yeah, and he wants to play games. So I don't know, but so this has been a great experience for me. I love being a barnstormer. I love being a core member of San Diego for Pete, and I love the friends that I've made. It's at 62 years old. I was 60, I guess, when I joined this campaign, and I would remark to people, when you get older, your affinity group of friends tends to get smaller and smaller. You get more selective who you spend your quality time with. I never in a million years thought that I would gain, 60 new barnstormer friends that are just great. And of that, maybe 10 of them are really good friends. And from San Diego for Pete, the core group of us, we have season tickets to the local soccer team, the San Diego Loyal. We go to soccer matches every other week together. We do birthdays together.
Nice.
We do when somebody's out of town and like Kate is coming back from Michigan, we're going to get together and go to dinner. We we volunteer to be ushers at the local theater together. This has become like a family, a real family.
Yeah.
And it's a family that I really like. I like these people. I want to work on another campaign with them. I want to work on another Pete campaign with them. So Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I mean, all the stuff that the Barnstormers are doing with all the other campaigns is quite remarkable. I mean,
Yeah.
you're still building that ground level
Yep.
grassroots movement, right?
Yeah.
But it's for
They've got-
another campaign, and
there's
it's
5 trips
you can
coming up.
replicate it. Yeah.
Some folks are going to all 5 of them, bless their hearts. That's a lot of traveling. It's a lot of money to have
really
to buy
good.
plane tickets, 'cause
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember. The last one that I'm going to be able to go to is in Pennsylvania, because that's close to where I grew up in South Jersey, and I can go there, and then I can leave that weekend and go down and work on NJ2 for the Monday and Tuesday of election week. But, there's Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, I think Nevada and Arizona, I think. I may have missed those up, but I think those are the 5. How great, right? I mean,
Yeah.
Barnstormers are everywhere. In a good way.
Yeah,
In a
they
good way,
are.
And they're
And
good
it's,
workers.
They are, and I noticed that everybody is just so happy to be part of the team and just working
Yeah.
together, and the joy that you guys bring about
Yeah.
with what you're doing is just really amazing.
Yeah, it's fun.
And I think that's the whole
love
point
it.
of Pete's campaign, and
Yeah.
and what they've injected into all of us
Yeah.
is that joy of working together and the connections that we've built with each other. It's
Yeah.
so nice.
You,
Yeah.
I think you got to do a podcast with Laura Cateau, right, from South Carolina. And then I know Julie, you did one with Julie. And they're just amazing people. They're just
Yeah,
incredible
yeah, they
people.
are.
And
They
not
are.
only do they work really hard for the campaigns, but they would give you the shirt off their back. That's the kind of people.
Yeah.
The thing that I love about the Barnstormers is every once in a while you'll get an email that'll say, "Hey, we're trying to help out this school with their supplies in South Bend. Can you help?" And boom, everybody sends supplies from Amazon to this list in South Bend. Like we've adopted South Bend as sort of our home away from home. Or then somebody
Yeah.
else will have maybe a health issue or somebody else, and everyone just kind of rallies around them. And I just think that's just the way people should be, right? I mean, that's really
Yeah.
wonderful that it's from a campaign, which I think is really
Right.
really wonderful.
Yeah.
I always
mean,
tell people
Pete,
when good.
Well, I mean, when Pete was talking about public service and how he wanted to create, what is it, the different types of corps that people can
Right.
volunteer and
Yep.
just be part of the community. And that's
Yep.
really what it's all about, right? Is just
I agree.
working together and making your community better. I mean,
Right.
that's exactly what Pete's people are doing right now, and making
Yeah.
changes every
And
single
it
day.
feels good. When you do something like that,
Yeah.
you get a good feeling too. It makes you feel
Right.
good to help somebody else. So why not do it? Why not? But I will say, this campaign attracted the most interesting, thoughtful, kind people. It just makes my heart, fill with joy and pride that I got to be a part of
Yeah.
something so incredible. It's like we often can't wait to see each
Yeah.
other again. It's like, when are we going to have another
Yeah.
reunion? When are we going to have another summit? So, I know they're working on it, so that'll be great. So I love it.
Well, I mean, look at the guy who we admire, right? I mean, he exudes all the traits that we look for.
Yep.
Kindness and empathy, and and so
Yeah, I
all
guess
of
it's not
us
surprising,
gravitate to
right?
that.
Yeah,
It's not surprising. So
Yeah, it's so nice.
Yeah.
It's so nice to have a candidate that you just never worry what's going to come out of their mouth or what they do in their private life. I just definitively feel like feel like he will never embarrass us. That's
Right.
saying something out of politicians. He will never embarrass us. And he always takes the high road, which is such a lesson we all can learn from, right? He never, he's super bright. It's just so nice to see someone
Yeah.
who is so off the charts in intelligence. Also, be able to relate to people on their level as well. That's not. Sometimes people that are super bright can't do that. They're not
Right.
wired that way. They can't really communicate that
Right.
way. He's kind of the full package. People like him.
Yeah.
I mean, and I also realize I have to learn to realize that not everybody will, especially people that are online and that are already connected to another candidate. I get it's very difficult to say anything nice sometimes about your opponents, right? I mean, they could let it go sometimes. He's not running for office anymore. But they too are playing the long game, right? They see him as a threat. But, it is just nice that, 9 out of 10 times when people write stuff when they're writing genuinely without an ulterior motive, it's usually kind words of praise for Pete, and that's makes us all proud, because we know him. We've met him. I getting to I will share one great story about Iowa, which to me is just typical Iowa. So there we were in Des Moines before the caucus, and it had snowed a couple of days before. And the first couple of days I was working out of Ames, because it was a San Diego volunteer who ultimately got a job on the campaign, Alex. They got a job working in the Ames office. So they invited me out, and I stayed with them for 2 days in Ames. And they gave me a precinct in Roland, which is this little farming town about 20 miles outside of Ames, right? So I'm driving through farmland, snow on both sides, by myself to canvass this town. And I had, 2 precincts, which was 2/3 of the city. And and I was going to be there all day. So I got to know the people at like the local convenience store, because they had a bathroom there. They let me use the bathroom. So I bought my coffee and my breakfast and my lunch. But there I was at the very end of the day, and I knock on this door, and this young woman opens it. She says, "Oh, you're canvassing." And she goes, "Oh." And I had a little bit of a tan. And she's like, "You're not from Iowa, are you?" I said, "No, I'm from California." She goes, "Wow, that's so cool that you're in Iowa canvassing. Would you like to come in?" And I was freezing at that point. I said, "I would love to come in." So she got me a hot chocolate, and we're sitting down talking, and her little baby, she got a little girl in her lap, and she tells me that she is the local chair for the Warren campaign. I said, "Oh, that's so cool." She goes, "Oh, I'm also in charge of running the actual caucus. I'm in charge of the caucus site tonight at the gym, just down the street." And she said, "Oh, but you'll be happy to know that my husband supports Pete, as do all of his friends in England who are they vote, as voters abroad. They all like Pete." Like, these are bright people, right? So we talked for like a half an hour. She was really wonderful. I really loved her. We exchanged, we befriended each other on Facebook. And so last thing I thought of it, I had to go home on caucus day. I had to leave to come back to San Diego. So I watched the caucus results, at least the Tuesday results, on television, like everybody else did. And that night before I went to bed, I noticed I had a message on Facebook from her, from Roland, Iowa. She goes, "Dear George," she goes, "you'll be pleased to know Pete carried Roland. You did a great job." And I just thought to myself, it wasn't because of me, because I may be talking to 30 people, but what a class act by her, typical Iowa, to spend the time at the end of what was sure a very long day to reach out to me. And I thought, see, that's the way campaigns and people should relate to each other. And it was very validating of me as a volunteer for her to say that, I thought it was really sweet because she remembered, that I had come to her house and I was, canvassing for Pete. And I was happy that he won Roland, but it was, who knows if that was one delegate or not, I don't know, but I was happy. It probably contributed to one delegate, so that was great. So in some small way, you can make a difference. So
wow, that's so nice. What a great story. I mean,
so
that's the kind of impact you want to have on people, right? Being nice, being kind, being respectful towards them. So then it leaves an imprint, and so they remember you.
Yeah. And maybe next time around, maybe she is the chair in Roland for Pete. She and her husband are Pete chairs in Roland, Who knows, right? I'll definitely look her up and try and convince her. I will work her.
There you go.
I will text her and I will email her. So that's sort of my Pete story.
That's so great. I love it. Yeah.
Thanks.
There's I know I feel like I can talk to you for a couple more hours on this. But
Totally.
Yeah. So with all the stuff that you do politically, I mean, have you ever thought about running for actual office at all?
So I have thought about it, and then I quickly sort of scuttled the idea. I've enjoyed being communications director for three communications director, and then deputy press secretary for the mayor. I like being behind the scenes. I don't think I'm thick-skinned enough to be the candidate. I think I think just knowing myself personally, I think if I were attacked, I would take it very defensively. I'm sure you can be trained not to do that, but I also, I just see what elected officials go through, and it's not something that I think I would want to put my husband or myself through that. I don't have, I think I can do just as much good as in support of somebody else. I don't have to be the guy. I don't have to be the elected official, So, I have thought about it. I did think about it earlier in life, but, at this point, I think that ship is probably set. But I am on my condo board of directors. So that's something. I'll let you know how the election goes next year. If I lose that, I'll be humiliated. I'll be like, I need to get some canvassers. But no, I like to support other people running. Good for them. You go do it.
Yeah. No, I asked because you seem very extroverted and charismatic, and I thought, maybe that idea of, being around people and talking to people is something that
I'm more of a, like I've coached softball for 30 years. I'm more of the captain or like a coach. Or like if there's a group, like I was like the
cheerleader.
I was a cheerleader. I was a college cheerleader. So that's
really?
kind of more my.
Seriously?
I was at Georgetown.
Oh, that's funny.
Boom! You got me. You know me inside out. That's too funny. Yeah, I was a college cheerleader
cute.
back when Georgetown had a really good basketball team. So. You might have heard of like Patrick Ewing. He was there when I was there. So
yes. Oh, nice.
Yeah. So he was a great guy. So so that's what I like to. I like to be supportive. I like to be, like I don't mind being like a pod leader or a team leader, but the candidate, I think it's a different skill set maybe that I don't have. But I'll work really hard for an elected official. Also, I will say, having done 12 years for elected officials and then 13 years as a deputy city clerk, I learned a lot of really good skills on how to interact with the public. When you're a staff member, you're always having to represent the council member in a very positive way. And you're always taking information out and bringing information back. And oftentimes when you're in the community, you're thrust on behalf of the council member or the elected official into a controversy. Two neighborhood groups are warring with each other over a project or something. I learned early on how to listen to all sides and try to come up with an answer that satisfies as many people as possible, which in politics, which is what your elected official wants to do, right? So I've learned those skills, but they really helped me in good stead when I was in the clerk's office and I was the face of the council and the clerk for the public at all the city council meetings. So all the public would come to me and I would school them on how to access the meeting, how they would fill out their speaker slips, how they would do their organized presentations. I would run the staff presentations. That was so much fun that it was really great to be able to interact with the public that way and make them feel like their experience at City Hall was a positive one. So I had that same sort of mentality, right? The respect thing, right? Respect the time that they're there and make them feel like city council was accessible as possible to them, that they knew how to speak, they knew when to speak, they knew how much time they had, they knew what they could and couldn't say, when they couldn't say it. I found that was important so that somebody could leave. Maybe that's the only time they ever come down to City Hall. I want them to leave with a positive impression of the process. So there are many ways we can all carry out sort of this message, even in our jobs or our personal relationships. Those rules of the road, they're not just for campaigns. They really, they're life lessons. They really are.
Yes, indeed.
Into your daily life. So I have the T-shirt. I wear that T-shirt often, and that's got the 10 rules. Not often. Sometimes people say, "What do those mean?" And I point them to the Pete thing at the very bottom. It's like Pete 2020, and then I explain to them, and they're always kind of intrigued by that. They like that message. They like their candidate. That candidate took enough time to think about how he wanted his staff and his volunteers to interact with each other and with other campaigns and with the public. Really, typically, you can tell he's a mayor, because that's when you're a local official, that's how your mind works. Because when you go to the grocery store and you're a local official, people know who you are, and they will tell you what they think. One of the other reasons why I didn't want to run for office. Because even as a staff member, I remember once I was in the jacuzzi at my gym, and this guy comes on over in the jacuzzi. "So, you work for Christine Keough. When is she going to put the street light?" I'm like, "Oh my God, I'm literally in the jacuzzi after work." But there is no off time for constituents.
Wow.
I'm like, "Hey, call me at the office on Monday and we'll look into that." But people will, in the grocery store, you're standing in line at the bank, they will hit you up if they know you work for an elected official. And you always have to be on your best behavior. You always have to be on your best behavior. Treat them with respect, and try and get them an answer. Try and help them. So, I hope that a lot of the people that worked on Pete's campaign that are now working on other campaigns ultimately get jobs in public office as staff members. I'm hoping that Andy's working on a Senate campaign here locally, state Senate, and she's running the campaign. And I hope he wins, and I hope he asks her to be his either district manager or, on his staff for policy, because she's so bright and she would make such a great staff member. And I see it in so many of these volunteers. I'm like, oh my God, they would make really great elected official staff members, because this campaign has trained them in how to, be disciplined in your work, do what you say you're going to do, follow through on it, be kind to people, sense of belonging. When you work in an office, it's a real sense of a family, and you have a sense of being connected to your community. So I really hope that the folks that were campaign volunteers continue to branch out, work on local campaigns or state campaigns, and seek out jobs for those elected officials. It's unbelievably rewarding. I love that the majority of my adult life has been in public service. 25 years. I used to be an attorney, then I was a journalist, I was an editor of the local gay paper. But then the 25 years that I spent working for the city of San Diego, the most rewarding block of time in my life. Really amazing. Really amazing.
Wow.
So that's my
really
charge.
awesome.
Go work on a campaign and then try and be a staff member. Please, put in your resume, be a staff member. Oftentimes, that's the way to get into an office, is to work on the campaign, because they've got to know you. They got to see how hard you worked, and they trust you. And the campaign, trust is a big deal, that you're delivering the message and you're bringing the right message back. So I always tell people, if you want to get a job in an elected official's office, campaign for them. Campaign for an office that will give you a reference to somebody else that they know in office is looking for somebody. So that's, I think, the way that Pete's tentacles can spread out around the country is if his followers get into either, a lot of them are running for office or go work for an elected official. Take that respect and that joy and that discipline and that belonging and the other six to your local communities. So
So I wanted to end with, you mentioned this video on YouTube from the San Diego for Pete group.
So let me cue it up for you. So we had a huge volunteer party about 3 weeks after Pete dropped out. And I had wanted someone to put together a montage, a collage of all the photos that we had taken during the time. And Haley, one of our incredible volunteers, she said, I've got it. I know how to do this, right? So she goes and she unveils at this party this amazing video. The first part of it was Pete's speech to all of the volunteers that he gave. Remember when you could call in and it was him thanking all the volunteers around the country, not a dry eye anywhere. And so she put some of the photos to that. But then she did this little break. And then she leads in with the High Hopes, sort of Panic at the Disco Pete theme song. And for the next 3 minutes of that song, she put together video snippets of our visibility, of some of the events that we held, and then probably 400 rapid fire photos of all of our volunteers, of all of our meetings. And we watched it. We're watching it at the volunteer event, and we're just sobbing because we couldn't believe that this group of people did that. We had forgotten all the things we had done: debate watch parties, Pete ups, farmers markets, and it was only like in a concentrated 3-month period: December, January, and February. We'd started before that, but most of it was during those 3 months. It was sort of prolific how much we had done. And so I showed that at the summit, the Soulcraft Summit. I said, look, I want to show you this to show you what you all have been doing all around in your own communities. This is what it looks like when you get a group of volunteers together and they really are dedicated. Look at what just this one group did, and we ran it, and everyone was like, oh my God, that is just amazing. I want to do that with the stuff that we have here in our group, because we have a ton of photos and we want to put that together. So I hope that you're able to share it, and I hope that people get the same really good feeling about that we had to work together as a team for San Diego for Pete and as Barnstormers and for the P2020 campaign, it was a really great way to finish the volunteer event and to thank everybody for the hard work that they had done. So I hope everybody likes it.
Yeah, I watched it and I was kind of grinning from ear to ear, and it just filled my heart with so much joy just seeing all the photos. It was so nice. Yeah,
so
definitely
glad.
would be sharing that. Yeah.
Wonderful. Awesome. Thank you.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you, George. I appreciate your time. And if you have more stories to share, maybe we can set up another session to talk.
I would love that. I appreciate the invite. I feel really honored and privileged to be a part of your podcast journey and to have followed in the steps of such august former Barnstormers that you've had on, which makes me feel nice to feel like that I had something to offer. So thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no, definitely. Everybody said George has a lot of stories to share, and so I really appreciate all the stories, and I'm sure you have a ton more to share. Today that's I think we can end here for now, and then
thank you.
Thank you so much, George. I love your enthusiasm and all that you've joy that you spread out into the world with your
thanks.
genuineness and authenticity, and I feel like I know you somehow, like you're a part of my family now.
Well, we're friends. We're friends. And when you come to San Diego, I want to take you and your partner out to lunch. So that'd be nice.
Thank you. Definitely
Wonderful.
We'll be in touch. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thanks.
You.
You take care.
You too.
Here's San Diegans for Pete Buttigieg, a grassroots movement working to elect openly gay South Bend Mayor Pete Buttigieg president in 2020. Join them on Facebook at San Diego for Pete Buttigieg. Buttigieg, 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 Buttigieg.
We really did model a different way to do politics, and I think sent a signal about what it means to pursue the presidency, not just with the next 4 years in mind, but the next 40. We have built an amazing community here, and it is very much my hope, and I'll do everything in my power to make this true, that this community only stays and strengthens. A group of people who believe in the same values, who have opened your hearts to each other, who have lifted each other up, who have really formed something that is not only special, but is very powerful, because the relationships and the common sense of purpose that we have, that's something we can put to work, and we can put it to work for what we believe in. This was never just about putting me in the White House. This was about the things that we believe need to happen and need to change in our country. And we should be more, not less, energized and committed about doing everything we can in many different ways to make that happen. So once again, I cannot thank you enough for everything you did, whether you joined our staff, whether you knocked on doors, whether you chipped in online, whether you told relatives and friends about what this campaign stood for. Thank you so much for what you brought to this, and please stay involved in every way that you can for what you believe in, what we believe in together. Let's work together to win the era.
Back in the days we wanted everything. Mama said, burn your biographies, rewrite your history, light up your wildest dreams, museum victories. Every day we wanted everything. Mama said, all tied up, no more love, and I'd hate to see you waiting. Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living, didn't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes. Mama said, something for oddities, stranger cruises. Ain't ever wannabes, winning the novelties that don't ever change. We wanted everything, wanted everything. Stay up on that rise, stay up on that rise, never come down. Oh, stay up on that rise, stay up on that rise, never come down. Mama said, don't give up, it's a little complicated, all tied up, no more love, and I'd hate to see you waiting. They say it's all been done, but they haven't seen the best of me. So I got one more run, and it's gonna be a sight to see. Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living, didn't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living, shooting for the stars when I couldn't make a killing. Didn't have a dime, but I always had a vision, always had high hopes. Had to have high hopes for a living, didn't know how, but I always had a feeling I was gonna be that one in a million. Always had high hopes.
If you've enjoyed this conversation, please be sure to subscribe so this channel can grow and I'll be able to share more stories with you each week. Thank you for listening.